Here comes Santa Claus, here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus Lane. Vixen and Blitzen and all his reindeer are pulling on the rein. Bells are ringing, children singing, all is merry and bright. Hang your stockings and say your prayers, 'cause Santa Claus comes tonight.
Here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus Lane. He's got a bag that is filled with toys for the boys and girls again. Hear those sleigh bells jingle jangle, what a beautiful sight. Jump in bed, cover up your head, 'cause Santa Claus comes tonight. Tonight, Santa Claus comes tonight. Happy day.
Welcome to West Readers Theater's holiday performance.
Today we are presenting shows that celebrate that jolly old elf,
Santa Claus!
We are proud to present Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Followed by The Polar Express, written and illustrated by Chris Van Allsburg.
And finally, a very special poem, Twas the Night Before Christmas.
And now, please enjoy
How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Every who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot.
But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season.
Now, please don't ask why.
No one quite knows the reason.
It could be, perhaps, that his shoes were too tight.
It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right.
But I think that the most likely reason of all
May have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small.
but
Whatever the reason,
His heart,
Or his shoes.
he stood there on Christmas Eve,
Hating the Who,
staring down from his cave.
the sour, Grinchy frown.
at the warm lighted windows below in their town.
for he knew every who down in Whoville beneath was busy now, hanging a holly who wreath.
And they're hanging the stockings.
He snarled with a sneer.
Tomorrow is Christmas. It's practically here.
Then he growled,
With his Grinch fingers nervously drumming,
I must find some way to keep Christmas from coming.
for
tomorrow,
he knew all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early.
They'll rush for their toys.
And then,
Oh, the noise,
oh,
oh,
the
the
noise,
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 noise. There's one thing I hate. All the noise, 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 noise.
Then the Who's
young,
and old,
would
would
sit
sit
down
down
to a feast. And they'd feast,
And
and
they'd
they'd feast,
and
and
they'd
they'd feast, 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 feast.
they would feast on who pudding.
And rare who roast beast.
Which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they do something I hate most of all.
Every Who down in Whoville
The tall
and the small.
would stand close together
with Christmas bells ringing, they'll stand
hand in hand,
and those Who's will start singing. And they'll sing, and they'll sing, and they'll sing,
sing,
sing.
Say,
And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought,
I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I've put up with it now. I must stop Christmas from coming. But how?
Then he got an idea.
An awful idea.
The Grinch got a wonderful
Awful idea.
I know just what to do.
The Grinch laughed in his throat,
I'll make a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat.
and he chuckled and clucked.
What a great Grinchy trick! With his coat and that hat, I look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer.
The Grinch looked around.
But since reindeer are scarce,
There
were none to be found.
did that stop the old Grinch? The Grinch simply said,
If I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead.
So he called his dog Max.
Then he took some red thread and he tied a big horn to the top of his head.
then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks.
On a ramshackle sleigh,
And he hitched up old Max.
then the Grinch said,
Get up!
and the sleigh started down.
Toward the homes where the Who's lay a snooze in their town.
All their windows were dark.
Quiet snow filled the air.
All the Who's were all dreaming sweet dreams without care when he came to the first little house on the square.
This is stub number 1.
The old Grinchy Claus hissed.
And he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist.
Then he slid down the chimney.
A rather tight pinch.
But if Santa could do it, then
Then
so could the Grinch.
He got stuck only once.
For a moment or two. Then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue, where the little whose stockings all hung in a row.
The stockings
He grinned
are the first things to go. And he slithered.
and slunk with a smile most unpleasant
Around the whole room, and he took every present.
Pop guns.
And bicycles,
roller skates,
Drums.
checkerboards,
tricycles,
Popcorn.
and plums.
And he stuffed them in bags.
Then the Grinch, very nimbly, stuffed all the bags one by one up the chimney.
Then
he slunk to the icebox.
He took the Who's Feast.
He took the Who pudding.
He took the roast beast.
He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took their last can of Who hash.
Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee.
And now
Grinned the Grinch.
I will stuff up the tree. And he started to shove.
When he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove.
He turned around fast, and he saw a small Who,
Little Cindy Lou Who.
was not more than 2.
The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter who'd got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said,
Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?
But you know that old Grinch was so smart and so slick.
He thought up a lie.
And he thought it up quick.
Why, my sweet little tot.
the fake Santa Claus lied.
There's a lot on this tree and folk lot on one side. Trying to take it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, then we'll bring it back here.
And his fib fooled the child.
Then he patted her head.
And he got her a drink.
And he sent her to bed.
And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup,
He went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up.
Then the last thing he took was to log for their fire. Then he went up the chimney himself.
The old liar.
On their walls, he left nothing but hooks and some wire.
And the one speck of food that was left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse.
Then he did the same thing to the other Whose houses.
Leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses.
It was 1:15.
all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a snooze when he packed up his sled, packed it up with their presents.
Their ribbons,
Their wrappings.
Their snoof and their fuzzles, their tringlers and trappings.
10,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet. He rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it.
Pooh-pooh to the whoos.
He was grinchily humming.
They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two. And the Who's down in Whoville will all cry boo-hoo. That's a noise
Grinned the Grinch.
that I simply must hear.
He
paused.
And the Grinch put a hand to his ear.
And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, and it started to grow.
But this sound wasn't sad.
Why, this sound sounded merry.
It couldn't be so.
But it was merry.
Very.
He stared down at Whoville.
The Grinch popped his eyes.
Then
he
he
shook.
shook.
What he saw was a shocking surprise.
Every Who down in Whoville,
The tall,
and the small,
Was singing without any presents at all.
He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. But somehow or other, it came just the same.
And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling.
How could it be so? It came without ribbons, it came without tags, it came without packages, boxes, or bags.
He puzzled and puzzled.
Till his puzzler was sore.
Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before.
Maybe Christmas
he thought.
can come from a store. Maybe Christmas perhaps means a little bit more.
And what happened then?
Well, in Whoville they say
That the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day.
and then the true meaning of Christmas came through. And the Grinch found the strength of 10 Grinches.
Plus 2.
And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight,
He whizzed with his load through the bright morning light.
with a smile to his soul, he descended Mount Crumpet.
Merely blowing hoo-hoo on his trumpet.
He rode into Whoville.
He brought back their toys.
He brought back their flute, the Who girls and boys.
He brought back their snoofs.
And their tringlers and fuzzles.
Brought back their pantukas, their dafflers and wuzzles.
He brought everything back. All the food for the feast.
And
He himself.
The Grinch carved the roast beast.
Welcome Christmas, bring your cheer. Cheer to all who's far and near.
Christmas Day is in our grasp, so long as we have hands to grasp.
Christmas Day will always be.
Just as long as we have we. Welcome Christmas while we stand,
Heart to heart,
and hand in hand. The end. Our next piece is from the book The Polar Express, written and illustrated by Chris Van Allsburg. Enjoy!
On Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound.
A sound a friend had told me I'd never hear.
The ringing bells of Santa's sleigh.
There is no Santa.
My friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong.
Late that night, I did hear sounds, though not of ringing bells.
From outside came the sound of hissing steam and squeaking metal.
I looked through my window and saw
A train standing perfectly still in front of my house.
It was wrapped in an apron of steam. Snowflakes fell lightly around it.
a conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars. He took a large pocket watch from his vest and looked up at my window.
I put on my slippers and robe. I tiptoed downstairs and out the door.
All aboard!
The conductor called out. I ran up to him.
Well,
He said,
are you coming?
Where? I asked.
Why, to the North Pole, of course.
Was his answer.
This is the Polar Express.
I took his outstretched hand and he pulled me aboard.
The train was filled with other children, all in their pajamas and nightgowns.
we sang Christmas carols and ate candies with nougat center as white as snow. We drank hot chocolate as thick and rich as melted chocolate bars.
Outside, the lights of towns and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced northward.
Soon, there were no more lights to be seen.
We traveled through the cold, dark forests where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from our train as it thundered through the quiet wilderness.
We climbed mountains so high it seemed as if we would scrape the moon.
But the Polar Express never slowed down.
Faster,
And faster.
we ran along, rolling over peaks and through valleys.
Like a car on a roller coaster.
The mountains turned to hills, the hills to snow-covered plains.
We crossed a barren desert of ice.
The great polar ice cap.
Lights appeared in the distance. They looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner sailing on a frozen sea,
There
said the conductor.
is the North Pole.
The North Pole! It was a huge city, standing alone at the top of the world, filled with factories where every Christmas toy was made.
At first, we saw no elves.
They are gathered at the center of the city.
The conductor told us.
That is where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas.
Who receives the first gift? We all asked.
The conductor answered.
He will choose one of you.
Look, shouted one of the children.
The elves!
Outside, we saw hundreds of elves.
As our train drew closer to the center of the North Pole,
We slowed to a crawl.
So crowded were the streets with Santa's helpers.
When the Polar Express could go no further,
We stopped, and the conductor led us outside.
we pressed through the crowds to the edge of a large open circle.
in front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and paced.
Ringing silver sleigh bells that hung from their harnesses.
It was a magical sound.
Like nothing I'd ever heard.
Across the circle, the elves moved apart.
And Santa Claus appeared.
Santa Claus!
Santa Claus!
The elves cheered wildly.
He marched over to us and
Pointing to me, said,
Let's have this fellow here.
he jumped into his sleigh.
The conductor handed me up. I sat on Santa's knee.
And he asked,
Now, what would you like for Christmas?
I knew that I could have any gift I could imagine. But the thing I wanted most for Christmas was not inside Santa's giant bag. What I wanted more than anything was one silver bell from Santa's sleigh. When I asked,
Santa smiled, and he gave me a hug.
And told an elf to cut a bell from a reindeer's harness.
the elf tossed it up to Santa.
He stood
Holding the bell high above him.
and called out,
The first gift of Christmas!
A clock struck midnight as the elves roared their approval.
Santa handed the bell to me.
and I put it in my bathrobe pocket.
The conductor helped me down from the sleigh.
Santa shouted out the reindeer's names. Dasher,
And Dancer,
Prancer,
And Vixen, Comet,
Cupid,
Donner, and Blitzen.
and cracked his whip. His team charged forward and climbed into the air.
Santa circled once above us.
then disappeared in the cold, dark polar sky. As soon as we were back inside the Polar Express,
the other children asked to see the bell.
I reached into my pocket, but the only thing I felt was a hole. I'd lost the silver bell from Santa Claus's sleigh.
let's hurry outside and look for it.
One of the children said, but the train gave a sudden lurch and started moving. We were
on our way home. It broke my heart to lose the bell.
When the train reached my house,
I sadly left the other children. I stood at my doorway and waved goodbye,
The conductor said something from the moving train.
but I couldn't hear him. What? I yelled out.
He cupped his hands around his mouth.
Merry Christmas!
He shouted.
The Polar Express let out a loud blast from its whistle and sped away.
On Christmas morning,
my little sister Sarah and I opened our presents.
when it looked as if everything had been unwrapped,
Sarah found one last small box behind the tree.
I had my name on it. Inside was
the
silver bell.
There was a note.
Found this on the seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket. Signed, Mr. C.
I shook the bell. It made the most beautiful sound my sister and I had ever heard. But my mother said,
Oh, that's too bad.
Yes, said my father. It's broken.
when I'd shake the bell,
My parents had not heard a sound.
At one time, most of my friends could hear the bell.
But as years passed,
It fell silent for all of them. Even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear its sweet sound.
though I've grown old, the bell still rings for me.
as it does,
For all
who
truly believe.
The
end.
And finally, we have a special performance to share.
Since December 23rd, 1823, this traditional holiday poem has enchanted adults and children alike with the visit of Santa Claus.
From our West family to yours, we share the beautiful story. 'Twas the night before Christmas. 'Twas the night before Christmas.
When all through the house,
Not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse.
the stockings were hung by the chimney with care.
In
Hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there.
the children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads.
And Mama in her kerchief
And I in my cap.
had just settled down for a long winter's nap.
When out on the lawn there arose
Such a clatter!
I sprang from the bed to see
What was the matter?
Away to the window, I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters, and threw up the sash.
The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below.
When, what to my wondering eyes should appear, but a miniature sleigh,
And 8 tiny reindeer.
with a little old driver, so lively and quick.
I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick.
more rapid than eagles, his coursers they came,
Then he whistled and shouted,
and called them by name.
No Dasher, no Dancer, no Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall. Now, dash away,
Dash away,
dash away all.
as dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle mount to the sky. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys,
And
Saint
Nicholas, too. And then, in a twinkling, I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof.
As I drew in my hand and was turning around,
Down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound,
He was dressed in all fur,
from his head to his foot,
and his clothes were all tarnished
with ashes and soot.
A bundle of toys he had flung on his back.
and he looked like
A peddler just opening his pack.
His eyes, how they twinkled. His dimples, how merry.
His cheeks were like roses.
his nose like a cherry,
His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow.
and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow.
The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke that encircled his head like a wreath
He had a broad face and a round little belly.
that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly.
He was chubby and plump.
A right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself.
a wink of his eye and a twist of his head,
Soon gave me to know
I had nothing to dread.
He spoke not a word,
But went straight to his work and filled all the stockings.
then turned with a jerk.
And laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod,
Up
the chimney he rose.
He sprang to his sleigh,
To his team gave a whistle,
and away they all flew like the down of a thistle.
but
I heard him exclaim ere he drove out of sight,
Happy
Christmas to all!
and
And
to
to
all
all
a good night.
The end.
We hope you've enjoyed today's performance.
Please stay safe.
and healthy.
This holiday season.
Until the next time when...
Again.
Happy holidays!
Sleigh bells ring.